Part 1. The Night His Eyes Found Me. People always say destinies begin in grand moments, on red carpets, in bright lights, under chandeliers dripping with silver. Mine didn't. Mine began on a Wednesday night, in a tiny, half-forgotten cafe that smelled like warm sugar and old dreams. The place was called the Golden Lantern, a soft little corner tucked behind Main Street, where music drifted through dim light like smoke. I sang there 3 nights a week, not because it paid well, but because singing was the only moment my heart felt bigger than my worries. On that night, my set was almost over. I'd already sung the soft, romantic songs the regulars liked, the nostalgic ones that made older couples hold hands across the table. My voice was tired, and so was I. I wiped my palms on my dress, a simple navy blue thing that made me feel like a star, even if no one else saw me that way. Then the door opened, and everything changed. He walked in like the night had carved a path for him. Tall, broad shoulders under a black coat, a presence that carried quiet gravity. His face was partly hidden by a hood and the dimness of the room. But I recognized him instantly. The way you recognize faces you've only seen in magazines or dreams. Robert Hale. Yes, that Robert Hale. The golden boy of Hollywood. America's romantic obsession. The actor whose eyes had caused more sighs than all the poets in the world combined. He didn't look like a star tonight. He looked tired, private, human, as if he was running away from something only his soul could name. He sat in the corner, head bowed, the soft glow of the lantern touching his cheek like it was greeting an old friend. My heart tripped over itself. What was someone like him doing here, in this tiny cafe, on a rainy midweek night? The owner, Mrs. Calloway, who pretended not to gossip but absolutely lived for it, leaned toward me backstage. "That man looks familiar," she whispered. I swallowed. "That's because he is." She gasped softly, hand over her heart. "Oh, good heavens! Do we need security? Is he shooting a movie? Should I hide?" I laughed quietly. He's probably just trying to be anonymous. And I didn't want to be the one to ruin it, so I pretended not to see him, but my heart didn't. Every time I looked up, my voice found a new softness, a sweetness I didn't know it had. I sang differently, deeper, fuller, letting every lyric melt through me, and each time I felt his eyes lift, watching me, listening closely, the kind of listening people do when they're hearing something they didn't know they needed. When my set was done, I bowed lightly and stepped off stage. My hands were trembling, which was ridiculous. I wasn't the type to be starstruck, but something about him felt magnetic. Not because he was famous, but because he carried a quiet sadness, the kind that makes you want to hold someone without knowing why. I was about to slip out through the back when I heard his voice, deep, warm, smoother than velvet. "Wait." I turned. He stood there, close now. The hood of his coat lowered. His eyes, God, those eyes were as striking in person as they were on screen. Gray-green, like stormy water, deciding whether to calm or rise. Your voice, he said softly. It's beautiful. It felt like you were singing to something inside me. My breath hitched. Thank you. I'm Miley. Miley, he repeated, tasting the name like it was something warm. I know who you are. He gave a small laugh, the kind that held relief in it. Fair enough. For a moment, we just stood there, the air between us strangely alive. His presence wasn't loud. It was gentle but intense, the way a fire glows without crackling. He looked at me as if I wasn't a stranger, but someone he'd been searching for. Then Mrs. Calloway appeared behind the counter, pretending not to eavesdrop, with the subtlety of an elephant in heels. Robert cleared his throat. Can I buy you a drink? Or maybe listen to you sing again? I flushed. I'm done for the night. He hesitated, and then something softened in his expression. Then, would you sit with me? Just for a little while? I should have said no. I should have told him I had things to do, dreams to chase, boundaries to respect. But the truth was simpler. I wanted to know him. I wanted to hear the version of him the world could never touch. So I nodded. He exhaled quietly, almost gratefully, and led the way to his corner table. The lantern between us cast a warm glow, making the moment feel like it was taking place outside of time. Why are you here? I asked gently. He looked into his drink. I wanted to be somewhere the world wasn't. My chest tightened. And did you find it? His eyes lifted to mine. I think I did, when I heard you sing. The words wrapped around me like a slow, warm tide. We talked for hours about music, about films, but also about quieter things. What it feels like to be lonely in a crowded room. The heavy price of being known by everyone, but understood by few. The comfort of small places that don't ask for anything. His voice was soft. His laughter was rare but sincere. He listened to me with an attentiveness that felt dangerously intimate. At one point, his fingers brushed mine when he reached for his glass. A feather-light touch, accidental or maybe not. But the warmth of his skin lingered on me like a promise. You have something, he murmured, not taking his eyes off my hand. Something? I whispered. A way of making a person feel seen. My heart fluttered, a delicate trembling thing. And you, I said, carry a sadness you hide behind charm. He froze, surprised. Then he smiled, slowly, beautifully, with a hint of vulnerability. You're perceptive. I sing for people. I see things. He looked at me for a long time. So long I felt the air tighten. If I told you I wanted to see you again, he said quietly, would you believe me? I swallowed. I don't know. Then let me prove it. His voice dipped lower, warmer, brushing against my skin like a soft heat. Tomorrow, same place, same time. There was no arrogance in his tone, only earnest longing. I should have hesitated, but when someone like Robert Hale looks at you like you're the one thing he didn't know he needed, you don't walk away. Okay, I whispered. His smile deepened, and something in his eyes flickered, a spark, a hunger, a connection as undeniable as gravity. He stood to leave, pulling his hood up again. Miley, he said softly just before stepping out. Tonight, you saved me a little. Then he disappeared into the night, and I was left standing there, heart trembling in my chest, knowing that nothing about my life was ever going to be the same again. Part 2. The night he let me into his world. The next evening, I arrived at the Golden Lantern early. Too early. The kind of early that reveals you care far more than you should for a man you met once. I told myself it was just curiosity, maybe even fascination, but my heart knew better. I dressed simply, soft ivory sweater, fitted black jeans, a little touch of gloss. Not enough to seem like I tried too hard, but enough that if he looked at me the way he had last night, I wouldn't crumble under it. I kept rehearsing what I'd say when he walked in. Something cool, something casual. Of course, when he finally did walk in, tall, impossible, warm eyes searching the room until they found me, every idea evaporated. "Miley," he breathed, and the way he said my name felt like he was confessing something. He sat across from me, and the lantern glow wrapped around us again. He smelled faintly like cedar wood and rain. Warm, masculine, familiar, even though I'd only breathed it once before. "You came," he said softly. "You told me to." He smiled, slow, grateful, boyish in a way that made my stomach flutter. "I hoped you would," he murmured. There was something unguarded in his expression, something vulnerable. Not the polished charm he wore in interviews or on magazine covers. This was raw, honest. A man stripped of spotlight and expectation. "So," I whispered, "why me?" He blinked. "Why you? Yes, you must hear incredible singers all the time and meet people everywhere you go. Why come back to see me again?" He didn't answer at first. Instead, he studied me in a way that made the world feel smaller, as if he was memorizing the shape of my eyelashes, the curve of my cheek, the way my fingers wrapped around my teacup. Then his voice dropped lower. "Because your voice didn't feel like a performance," he said quietly. "It felt like truth." My breath caught. "And," he added after a long pause, "because you didn't look at me like I was everyone else's fantasy." "So, how did I look at you?" I asked. "Like you saw the person, not the actor. Do you know how rare that is for me?" There was so much sincerity in his tone, it softened something inside me. "And what do you want me to see?" I whispered. His eyes warmed, a slow, molten heat. "I want you to see the man who hasn't stopped thinking about you since last night." My pulse stumbled. He leaned slightly closer, elbows on the table. His voice dipped to something intimate, textured like velvet. "I kept remembering the sound of your voice, the way you closed your eyes when you sang that last note, the way your lips curved when you tried not to blush." His gaze lingered on my mouth. I didn't want the night to end. Heat rushed through my cheeks. To deflect, I laughed softly. "You're a dangerous man, Robert." He tilted his head. "Why do you say that?" "Because you say things like that." "And how does it make you feel?" The question was soft but charged, like the room was holding its breath. I swallowed. "Seen." The words seemed to hit him. His expression gentled, softened further. "That's all I want," he whispered, "to see you, and for you to see me." A quiet beat passed between us. One heartbeat, then another. He broke the silence. "Miley, can I take you somewhere?" My brows lifted. "Where?" "A place where I can be myself, and you can breathe without an audience." I hesitated, not because I didn't trust him, but because the moment felt too big, too significant. "Is it far?" I asked. "It's quiet," he replied, "and safe and warm." Warm. The way he said it made something inside me tilt, lean toward him like a flower toward sunlight. "Okay," I breathed. He reached out his hand, not commanding, not assuming, just offering. I placed mine in his. His fingers closed around mine in a gentle, deliberate way that sent a heat up my arm, settling under my skin. He didn't lead me to a car. Instead, we walked through quiet streets lit by amber streetlights, through corners of the town tourists never noticed. He kept our hands loosely intertwined, as if he wanted the contact but didn't want to startle me. After a few minutes, we reached a small hidden pier behind a row of old shop fronts. Wooden planks, little lanterns along the water, the soft lapping of waves below. "This is where I come when I want to forget everything," he said. "You've been here before?" I asked. "More than you'd imagine." He lowered his hood, the wind brushing through his hair. "No cameras, no crowds, just peace." He let go of my hand slowly, like he didn't want to, and leaned on the railing. I stood beside him. The lantern light danced on the water, making everything shimmer. He looked at me, really looked. "I want to know you," he said simply. I laughed softly. "You barely know anything about me." "Then tell me." I leaned against the railing. "I'm a small singer from a small town. I write songs I'm too shy to show people. I live in an apartment so tiny it hums when the heater turns on." I smiled. "That's not exactly the life of someone who belongs next to you." He turned his body fully toward me. His face was inches from mine now, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. "Who told you that?" he whispered. The night shifted, subtly, intensely. His nearness was overwhelming in the softest, sweetest way. "I just know it," I murmured. "You're wrong," he said gently. "You belong anywhere your heart wants to be, even beside someone like me." The words pressed against my chest. He reached out and brushed a loose strand of hair from my cheek. His knuckles grazed my skin, light, warm, slow. My breath caught. He noticed. His voice dipped lower, softer. "Miley," he said, the syllables thick with longing. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Last night, when I touched your hand, did you feel it too?" I couldn't lie, not with him looking at me like that. "Yes," I whispered. "I felt it." He inhaled, a quiet, shaky breath he didn't try to hide. "I haven't felt something like that in a long time," he murmured. "A pull, like something in me recognized something in you." My heart melted. "Me too," I admitted. The wind shifted, brushing past us like an invisible request. Everything felt suspended, like the universe had pressed pause, and the only thing moving was the space between us. He lifted his hand, slowly, giving me every chance to pull back. I didn't. His fingers touched my jaw, warm, tender, tracing the line of it. My eyes fluttered shut for a moment, overwhelmed by how gentle he was with me. "Miley," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, "I want to kiss you, if you'd let me." My breath trembled. I opened my eyes. His gaze held mine, soft, earnest, slightly uncertain. "You can," I whispered. He stepped closer, so close I could feel the warmth of his chest against mine. But he didn't rush. He cupped my cheek softly, his tongue brushing my skin in slow, delicate strokes. When he finally leaned in, he paused just a breath away, lips barely grazing mine, a touch so light it felt like a question. I answered it by leaning in the final inch. Our lips met in the gentlest kiss, tender, emotional, full of quiet longing. No urgency, no pressure, just the pure sweetness of two people finding each other for the first time. His hand slid to the back of my neck, cradling me, his lips moving against mine slowly, carefully, like he wanted to savor every second. Heat unfurled in my stomach, soft and warm. My fingers curled into his coat, holding him closer. The kiss deepened, still sweet, still soft, but threaded with something warmer, something that made my heartbeat move in slow, heated waves. His breath mingled with mine, worn and unsteady. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads rested together, both of us breathing a little harder. "Miley," he whispered, voice warm and low, "I don't want tonight to end." Neither did I, but I also didn't want us to rush something that felt like it was growing in the most beautiful way. So I brushed my thumb along his jaw, feeling the faint stubble there. "Then don't end it," I whispered. "Just stay with me in this moment a little longer." He exhaled, his lips curving in the sweetest, most devastating smile. "I can stay as long as you want." And he did. We stood there on the pier, talking softly, sharing secrets, letting our hands find each other again and again. He kissed me 2 more times, slow, warm, lingering, each one sweeter than the last. By the time he walked me home, my heart was no longer my own. It belonged to him. Part 3. The night our hearts became one. After that night on the pier, the world rearranged itself in the most subtle, irresistible ways. Small things shifted. The way my mornings tasted, coffee with extra patience, the way the bookstore lights seemed warmer when I opened the door, the little pocket of air around me that thrummed with expectation. It felt less like falling and more like walking into a room I had always meant to enter. Robert and I slid into a rhythm that was quietly perfect. He would come to my sets when he could, sometimes disguised with a cap and oversized sunglasses, sometimes with nothing but the audacity to sit in the front row and clap like he meant it. I would appear at his press readings and premieres when he asked, holding his arm like he was a private treasure and not a public spectacle. We made a secret language of small gestures. The way he tucked a napkin into the collar of his shirt when he was nervous. The way I hummed under my breath when I was sure of something. We learned each other's silences and how to be comfortable in them. One late autumn evening, after a set at the Lantern, Robert asked me if I wanted to visit the studio he liked. Not a movie set, but a small, forgotten theater where he sometimes rehearsed lines aloud and breathed the echo of his voice. "It's quiet tonight," he said. "Come with me. I want to read to you." I will never forget that night. The theater was a narrow champagne velvet sort of place. It smelled of old wood and dust, and 100 lines whispered into red velvet seats. He had a way of moving through it that suggested he had known the echo for years, though perhaps he had only discovered it recently. He led me to the center of the stage and turned to face the empty seats, then looked over his shoulder at me with the gentleness of a man offering a gift. "I thought," he said, "that tonight I'd read you something. Not because I'm romantic, though I suppose I am, but because the words sounded like you when I first found them." He opened a worn book he kept in his coat and read with a voice that made each sentence bloom. When he read about longing, my ribs ached. When he read about the taste of a first kiss, my hand found his and didn't let go. At one point he paused and looked at me as if the lines on the page were inadequate, then improvised the rest of the paragraph in a way that turned the theater into our small, private world. Between readings, we whispered. He told me about a childhood memory, a lake that smelled of pine and hot metal from fishing poles, a dog named Gus who used to expect the whole world to be thrown into his orbit. I told him, in return, about a night my mother taught me to harmonize with a lullaby, how I used to stand on the kitchen counter just so the traffic noise melted into the melody. It was an evening of slow confessions and quiet promises. At some point, his voice softened, and he said, as if admitting a small truth, "When I'm with you, I remember why I chose to tell stories. You make everything I do feel like it has meaning outside of applause." Those words lodged into me like a seed. I touched his hand and felt it thrum under my palm, alive and patient. "And you," I told him, "make me believe I can be more than the girl in the lantern. You let me imagine stages I would otherwise be too afraid to enter." He smiled, the kind of smile that made his eyes fold into crescent moons. "Then let's be brave together," he whispered. We left the theater and walked hand in hand through the sleeping city, the streetlights a tiny audience for the two of us. He kissed me on a bridge that spanned a creek where the water below hummed secrets. The kiss was slow and deep without haste, a poetry of breath and warmth. It was the kind of kiss that assured you of being wanted and treasured, a shared benediction of the heart. When we finally parted, the world seemed to be sitting still, holding its breath with us. Love, we discovered, is not only in declarations. It exists in the quiet sharing of life, in the way he learned the names of my favorite songs, and how I learned his nervous rituals. It was in the nights we spent on his couch, reading scripts and lyric sheets, in the mornings of pancakes and laughter, and in the afternoons when we simply lay in bed with sunlight painting stripes across the sheets, talking about nothing and everything. Yet, as the sweetness deepened, the edges of our lives began to rub against each other in ways that required tending. Fame is not a creature that respects boundaries. It seeps through the seams. Robert's world came with lenses and flashbulbs, with fans who believed they owned pieces of his heart, and with paparazzi who could make any private moment public in the stroke of a camera shutter. One evening, a photograph appeared, not on my social media, because I kept that modest and slow in a gossip column that had a way of making mountain storms out of candle flints. The picture was grainy and shot from across a distance, the kind of image meant to suggest scandal without saying anything explicit. It showed Robert and me leaning close in conversation outside a cafe. He was protective, his arm around me. I was laughing, head tipped back. The caption underneath suggested an unexpected liaison, insinuating that I might be some opportunist or career climber, using him as a prop. The comment section filled with people's assumptions. Some were oddly tender. He looks happy. Others were cruel, as if happiness were a crime. I felt myself becoming scrutinized under the wrong kind of light. I was not ready for the sudden heat of public opinion. I had always been small, in the best sense, modest, private, unobtrusive. The attention made me flinch. Robert called within minutes of the post. His voice was careful but steady. "Miley," he said, "are you okay?" "I will be," I answered, trying to keep my voice level. "I'm small, Robert. I can handle whispers." "No," he replied, and I felt him smile in the line of his words. "You don't have to handle anything alone." He came over within the hour, moving through the night like someone who never really slept. He wrapped his arms around me like a shield and pressed a kiss to my temple as if asking forgiveness for the world's cruelty. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I hate that this leaks into your life." "It's not your fault," I told him, though my heart clung to him like a life preserver. "It's just a thing that happens when someone you love is famous." He stayed the night. In the morning, we addressed it together, not with a press release, but with honesty. He spoke carefully about privacy and how there were things he could do to protect the life we were building. We agreed on small things, fewer public displays, more hidden walkways, a code word for when the cameras circled too close. He listened to my fears about being seen only as an accessory to his fame and promised in a quiet, solemn tone that he would never let that happen. "But you must promise me one thing," he said, taking my hands in his. "If it ever gets too much, you say the word. I will move mountains for you." I laughed, tears threatening. "You always say mountains." "It's a big thing to move for you," he said, smiling. And he did move them, in small acts that meant the world. Turning down an exclusive interview that might exploit our relationship. Publicly praising my music in ways that elevated my art without making me a mere curiosity. And once, when a particularly intrusive photographer camped outside my building, showing up unannounced with a dozen flowers and the soft insistence that we walk through another door, one with a converse of secrecy and safety. We learned to be fierce for each other. My fans joined us as quiet protectors, those who had come to the lantern for the music long before Robert ever walked in. They wrote notes, left baked goods, and formed a buffer that felt like small-town solidarity wrapped in digital hands. Their kindness sustained me in ways I hadn't expected. Yet the threats were not only external. We both carried bruises from separate lives that sometimes surfaced like unwanted tides. Robert carried the burden of an industry that chewed people up and spat out pieces that never fit back together. There were directors he had trusted who used him like a prop, and producers who valued him less for his art and more for his ability to sell magazines. I had my own ghosts, a childhood of proving my worth through applause. The quiet ache of a mother who had always feared instability. One night, after a particularly draining press tour he had to endure, he arrived at my apartment, looking smaller than he should have. A fatigue lined his face like a script of sorrow. He sank into my couch and looked at me like a man who had been asking himself the same question for months. "Do you ever think," he murmured, "that loving someone in this world is selfish? For me to bring you into my life, with all the things that come with it, would you regret choosing me?" The question threw me. It was not rhetorical. It was raw. I could see the tremble in his hands, the hands that had once reached out to me so gently on the pier. I wanted to steady him, to tell him he was not a hurricane, but a harbor. Instead, I reached for his face and traced the line of his jaw with my thumb. "I don't think it's selfish," I said. "I think it's brave and messy and worth it." He let out a laugh that sounded like a sob and buried his face in my hands. "I'm so tired of being a character in other people's stories," he whispered. "I want to be a person in your story." "You already are," I replied, feeling the words settle into him like sunlight. "You're the person who comes with pancakes at midnight, who reads me terrible morning poetry, who kisses me in the quiet. Everyone else's noise can drown out the truth, but the truth is that you are kind to me. You keep me." He looked up then, tears brimming like unshed rain. "Stay with me," he said simply, "not because it's convenient or glorious, but because in the small moments, you're where I want to be. If you ever want to leave, really leave, I'll understand. But if you stay, I'll make sure our life is yours as much as it is mine." The tenderness of that plea unclenched something hardened within me. I did not feel like leaving. I wanted to be a part of his world, because his world, when shared with me, became more than a spectacle. It became inhabited with meaning. We made a pact, not with rings or promises on a stage, but with small recurrent actions. We would dedicate certain nights to each other, alone. No phones, no cameras, just dinners cooked in overworked pans and songs hummed in the dark. We would meet each other's parents when the time felt right. We would not allow fame to write our definition. And yet, as months deepened into a year, life, as it always does, demanded that we adapt. Robert received parts that took him away for months at a time. I landed a small residency at a music festival out of state. We learned a new kind of loving, patient, tethered, resilient. The night our hearts truly became one, not in some dramatic, cinematic way, but in the slow surrender that makes love real, came not with fireworks, but with a small, shy confession. It was a snowy evening. We had both been traveling. He had returned from a shoot, and I had come back from a brief tour. I opened the door to my apartment to find him waiting on the small stoop, snowflakes feathering his hair like delicate confetti. He looked exhausted, but his face softened the second he saw me. He stepped forward and gathered me into his arms without a word. The world narrowed to the two of us. He held me as if he feared the weight of something and needed to make sure it was light. We walked inside, shaking snow from our coats, and he wrapped both of my hands in his, palms rough with the work of life. We made tea and sat on the tiny rug in front of the window, watching snowflakes chart their own slow conspiracies. I leaned against him, the slow rhythm of his breath a balm. For a while, no one spoke. Then he turned to me and said, in a voice that trembled just enough to be honest, "I love you." The 4 words arrived with the simplicity of a bell, not rhetorical flourish, not cinematic hyperbole, just the unadorned truth he had been carrying for months. Time stilled. I felt the words reverberate through me like a chord struck in the heart. I had known, of course. Love had been growing between us like ivy, slow, relentless, beautiful. But hearing him say it, hearing him choose to place that word between us in the open like an offering, made everything feel anchored. "I love you too," I answered, and I meant every syllable with my entire being. He kissed me then, not the soft teases of earlier nights, but a kiss that wrapped my name around his mouth like a hymn. It was an affirmation, a vow without vows. When we parted, we rested our foreheads together, the kind of close that made the world outside shrink to a tolerable distance. There were no rosy illusions that everything would be easy after that night. Things still circled, schedules still demanded a lot of both of us, and fears still whispered in the dark. But the declaration altered the frame. We had chosen each other in full knowledge of the cost, and that choice gave us a kind of armor. Love, I learned, is not a single incandescent flare. It is the accumulation of small decisions: to stay, to defend, to forgive, to trust. It is the late-night confessions, the shared silence, the choice to make space for one another's pain. It's the fierce tenderness of someone who will move mountains for you, and the bravery of someone who will stand on the shore while you dive into the ocean of your work. That night, we fell asleep in each other's arms, the city outside muffled by snow, the future uncertain, but softened by the slow strength of our bond. And as dawn crept on the edges of the sky, I realized something sweet and steady. The life I had imagined in whispered, lonely songs had become a duet. Part 4. The night our forever found us. Snow still dusted the windows the morning after Robert whispered, "I love you." It felt like the universe had paused, deliberately, tenderly, to hold that moment in place for us. I woke first, the warmth of his arm wrapped around my waist, his breath soft against the back of my neck. For a long moment, I didn't move. I simply let myself feel it. His presence, his quiet, his steadiness, his love. My heart had been waiting for something like this far longer than I'd ever admitted aloud. Then he stirred, pressing a gentle kiss to my shoulder, a soft hum vibrating in his chest. "You're awake?" he whispered, voice still thick with sleep. "Mm-hmm," I murmured. Didn't want to move. "Good," he said, tightening his hold just a little. "Stay like this with me." There was something about the way he held me, not possessively, but protectively, that made the world beyond my tiny apartment feel infinitely distant. We stayed tangled together for what felt like hours, exchanging quiet kisses and warm laughter. His fingertips traced lazy patterns on my waist, not rushed, not desperate, just slow, warm, affectionate strokes that sent sweet shivers down my spine. Our intimacy wasn't loud or urgent. It was tender, like the soft unfolding of a flower at dawn. When we finally got out of bed, the city was bright with morning light. Robert insisted on cooking breakfast, even though he could barely operate a skillet without the smoke alarm threatening to sing back up. He tried flipping a pancake and failed spectacularly. The pancake landed on the counter instead of the pan. I burst out laughing. He pointed the spatula at me. "I meant to do that. It's modern art." "Oh yes," I teased. "I can feel the sophistication." He crossed the kitchen in 2 long strides, slipped his arms around me from behind, and rested his chin on my shoulder. "I love your laugh," he whispered. "It makes everything lighter." In that small kitchen, with sunlight spilling across the floor and his arms wrapped around me, I realized something. I wasn't just in love with him. I was building a life with him. But the world had other plans. The storm we didn't expect. 2 weeks later, Robert's new film trailer was released. It was big, the kind of blockbuster that demanded attention. Suddenly, he was everywhere again. On talk shows, on magazine covers, on posters, on social media. And with that came the noise. Rumors, speculation, questions about his mystery girlfriend. Comment sections full of strangers dissecting my life when they knew nothing about me. But it wasn't the gossip that caused the storm. It was someone from his past. Her name was Vivian Marlowe, a stunning, polished actress who had starred with Robert 3 years ago. The media loved to pair them together, even though they were never a couple. And now, Vivian's publicity team began pushing a story, a rekindled romance, on-set chemistry reignited, old feelings resurfacing, and the worst, photos of them laughing together during an interview were plastered everywhere. I told myself it was harmless, work, publicity, part of the job. But one night, he came to my apartment looking shattered. "Miley," he said softly, shutting the door with too much care. "We need to talk." Those words usually never mean anything good. He ran a hand through his hair. "The studio wants me to lean into the Vivian narrative for the press tour. They think it will boost the film." I stood very still. "And what does that mean?" "It means I'll be photographed with her a lot. he said gently. Events, interviews, red carpets. My voice came out small. Together? He swallowed. Yes, they'll want us to seem close. A quiet heaviness filled the space between us. I knew how Hollywood worked. I understood image. But Robert wasn't just some character on a poster anymore. He was mine. And the thought of watching him smile beside someone else, even for cameras, hurt in ways I didn't know how to express. I don't want to lose you, he said suddenly. Not over this, not over them. Then tell me, I whispered, how I'm supposed to walk into a world that's already decided who you belong with. He crossed the room and took my hands. His grip warm and firm. You decide, he said. You, not them. I looked up at him, eyes stinging. And if people think I'm not enough? He cupped my face with both hands. Then they're blind. Because you, exactly as you are my heart. A tear slipped down my cheek. He kissed it away. I'll make this right, he promised. Just trust me. And I did. But trust did not erase fear, and fear did not erase love. They lived together in my chest, battling quietly. A moment, everything cracked open. The night of the film premiere, Robert asked me to come. I want you beside me, he said, no matter what the studio wants. But doubt clung to me. What if I don't belong there? I whispered. What if I embarrass you? He stared at me like I had just insulted the sky. You, he said firmly, are the only person I want there. So I went. I wore a soft champagne-colored dress that floated around my knees and made me feel like a slow exhale. My hair curled at the ends, my lips a natural rose. When we arrived, the noise of the crowd hit me like a wave. Shouts, flashing lights, cameras everywhere. For a moment, I froze. Then Robert reached for my hand and laced his fingers through mine, squeezing gently. I've got you, he whispered. And just like that, I could breathe again. But the real storm came when Vivienne appeared, stunning in a crimson gown, her smile sharp as a blade. Reporters swarmed her immediately. Vivienne, over here! Is it true you and Robert are rekindling things? You two look perfect together. That last comment cut deeper than it should have. Vivienne glanced at us, her eyes flickering to where our hands were intertwined. Something venomous flashed in her expression before she smoothed it into a camera-ready smile. She walked toward us, heels clicking like applause. Robert, she said sweetly, we need a photo together. He stiffened. I'm with someone. Her gaze slid to me, appraising, dismissive. Oh, she said, of course, the singer. The way she said singer made it sound like a hobby, not a profession. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, embarrassment and defensiveness tangling inside me. Robert stepped forward, protective. Vivienne, not tonight. But photographers had already gathered, shouting for just one picture. Vivienne leaned closer to him, touching his arm with false intimacy. Come on, darling, for old time's sake. My chest tightened. Robert's jaw clenched. I said no. The firmness in his voice shocked everyone, including Vivienne. But the studio can fire me, he snapped. I'm done performing relationships. I'm not losing the woman I love for publicity. Everything stopped. My breath, Vivienne's smile, the crowd noise, time itself. Did he just... The photographers caught everything. His words, his gaze fixed solely on me, the way his fingers tightened around mine like a vow. Vivienne's face faltered. She stepped back slowly, then turned away. And just like that, the storm passed. Robert turned to me, eyes softening. "You okay?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You said that very publicly." He smiled, a little nervous, a lot sincere. "I meant it very privately." He brushed a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch warm and sweet. "You changed my life, Miley. I won't let anyone rewrite our story." And then, on the red carpet, under the noise and lights and chaos of the world, he kissed me, deeply, slowly, with a tenderness that silenced everything else. Not for the cameras, not for the public, but for me. Only me. The quiet forever. Life didn't magically become perfect after that night. Fame still buzzed around us. Rumors still appeared. But something had shifted. He had chosen me. Completely, unapologetically, and without hesitation. And a few months later, on a quiet evening in the little theater where he first read to me, he surprised me again. The stage lights were dim, casting gold across the empty seats. He led me to the center of the stage, holding my hands in his. "Do you remember what I said the first night we were here?" he whispered. "That you wanted to tell me a story," I said. He smiled, eyes warm. "Yes, but now I want to live one with you." Before I could respond, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath trembled. "Miley," he whispered, "you are the quiet song that steadied me, the warmth that brought me home, the one person who sees me beneath all the noise. If you'll let me, I want to spend my life being yours." He opened the box. Inside was a simple, stunning ring, elegant, timeless, and beautifully understated. Just like the love we built. My voice was a whisper. "Robert." Tears filled his eyes, and he didn't try to hide them. "Say yes," he murmured. "Please." I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I breathed. 1,000 times, yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger with hands that shook from emotion, not nerves. When he leaned in and kissed me, warm, slow, full of devotion, the theater around us seemed to glow. We held each other, wrapped in a moment that felt like the beginning of an entire future. A soft forever, a fierce love, a story we chose again and again. And as he rested his forehead against mine, whispering "I love you" against my lips, I realized something beautiful. My small-town voice and his world-famous face didn't just fit together. They were made for each other. Our love wasn't loud. It wasn't perfect. But it was true. And that was enough for a lifetime. The end.